I'm on my way home, and I know with the camera on this you can't really see the difference between the very regular neighborhood I'm walking through and the skyscraping apartments that are ahead, but I've shown them to you before in other videos. But whenever I walk down a street like this with the palatial apartments waiting at the end compared to the small and cramped quarters of the regular people, I'm very strongly put in mind of Cyberpunk and the clips that went around recently about Cyberpunk being dead. Well, they don't gel completely with me, and it's for this reason: the strong disparity between rich and poor, and not just here. And I find that whenever I think about the technology of Cyberpunk, when I think about what would make a person remove their perfectly good and healthy arm and replace it with a cybernetic arm, or their eyes, or any of these things which, when we're in character generation, make absolute sense for gaining game and mechanical advantages and just for the cool factor. But if someone were to come to you today and say, hey, would you like to have your eyes removed or replaced by, cyber eyes, to never again see organically, to only see digitally, even if that vision was technically superior, but somehow pixelated, would you do it? What would make somebody do that? Is it self-hatred? Is it loathing? Is it a nihilistic perversion of the modern human? Or is it the desperation, the sense that without that edge, you are not going to survive? And I don't mean an edge in combat, I mean an edge economically. I don't know about you, but my day is spent surrounded by people who make very little money, mixed shoulder to shoulder with people who make god-awful amounts of money. And you can't escape each other. It's not like there are sectors of the city where only the poor people live and sectors of the city where only the rich people live, and never the twain shall meet. No, they are butted together, cheek and jowl. One side pretending the other side doesn't exist, and the remaining side wishing to replace the people that are ignoring them. And maybe it's that kind of desperation, that kind of starvation, that kind of slow building fury that makes somebody hack apart their own living tissue and turn themselves into something half man, half machine. And maybe they don't get a choice of how pretty it is, or if it has cables or not, or if they can stand to look at themselves in the mirror. Maybe all they care about is that at the end of the day, they're going to get a meal, and at the end of the week, they're going to be one step closer to the financial security that they absolutely do not have today. Desperation is a powerful force, and it's not just money. Some people it's status, other people it's that woman or man that they absolutely want to merit, be worthy of. And moving from where you are to where you want to be can sometimes make people make those permanent mistakes, life in the shadows, or trundling off to some faraway land to do something semi-legal or up into orbit. Right? When we consider things like Neuromancer, how was it exactly that our protagonist wound up in the straits that he was in? Right? Bad decisions. And so, when we think about the tech, when we think about how things are seeming dated now, I think it overlooks something. I think it overlooks things like a crash. Things come to abrupt ends sometimes, and forward progress. You know, I remember first coming over here in 1997, and suddenly, one day, the currency was practically worthless. Literally, the bottom fell out of the economy, and everything that you had planned was suddenly on hold. If you were trying to deal in any way internationally, suddenly the purchasing power of your currency was less than half. That new device that you wanted to buy, gone. Development projects, construction. Quite literally, for years, I would walk past the skeletons of towering apartment buildings left empty and undeveloped because there simply was no money to build them. And the people who had paid in advance to have their home built were left trying to find whatever housing they could, or piled in one on top of each other, families in these tiny apartments, waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for their apartments to be finished. There simply was no money, but there was a lot of desperation. I remember hearing about car accidents, my coworkers having car accidents, and nobody being insured because there was no money. And rather than, you know, sue each other, they would get drunk together, laugh it off, and try and deal with the damage to their car in whatever way they could. I mean, these are just anecdotes, but it all goes toward this concept of desperation, the powerful effect of desperation, desire, and bad decisions. And so while we might think some of the tech in Shadowrun or Cyberpunk is a little quaint now, these design decisions may not be something that the designers wanted. They may be what the designers were able to afford in countries whose economies are collapsing from within and without. And even though some of the tech that we have now in our real world eclipses that which has been written about in these imaginary worlds, that can contribute in many ways to the sense of loss and the sense of falling behind and the sense of the fear of the tomorrow that you are convinced you're not going to have, but you're going to struggle for anyway. And that, to me, is the essence of cyberpunk.